Electric vehicles are seen as the future of transportation. Energy efficient, zero emissions, and better for the environment. But are they as perfect as they seem? With battery production challenges and charging limitations, is the world really ready to go fully electric for its transportation needs? Let us take a deep dive into the electric vehicle escapade, the good, the bad, and some potential alternatives.
Now, electric cars, are they the ride of the future?
But for electric vehicle users,
electric vehicles,
and electric cars,
the latest and greatest electric cars.
Believe it or not, electric cars have been around for over a century. In the early 1900s, EVs were actually more popular than traditional gasoline cars. They were quieter, easier to drive, and didn't require the infamous hand cranking to start. By the early 1920s, petrol and diesel-powered cars took over. Thanks to mass production and cheap oil, gasoline-powered cars became the standard, while EVs faded into history. Fast forward to the 2000s, and the rise of the lithium-ion batteries changed everything. The BMW i3, Nissan's Leaf, and cars like this Peugeot 106 Electric proved that electric cars could be fast, reliable, and efficient. But then the UK government announced that it's delaying its ban on the internal combustion engine by 5 more years to 2035, which basically proved that going electric was not as easy as we all thought.
Electric vehicle take-up isn't taking place in the UK, Europe and US as quickly as anticipated. There's a number of reasons for that. One is the upfront price of the vehicle is still higher than internal combustion engine. And secondly, the charging infrastructure isn't being built out quickly enough. So that's the major problem. It's different in China, where because they've been able to get battery costs down so low, and also with government support, electric is cheaper than petrol equivalents in many cases. So we're seeing very rapid take-up. So on the one hand, Western car makers are struggling because they're having to invest extremely heavily in developing electric vehicles, and yet demand is not at the pace anticipated. And on the other hand, they're being attacked by Chinese brands, which have been supported heavily by government, but also have been able to get their costs down dramatically over 25 years. So essentially, I think there's an existential threat for the Western car industry, which, unless it can adapt very, very quickly, risks the mass industry at least being wiped out by the Chinese. That sounds crazy, but you look at many industries, electronics, PC building, computer screens, TVs, that has happened. Why should the car industry be any different?
The first hurdle that most EVs struggle with is the charging infrastructure, which needs massive improvements to keep up with demand. The total number of public charge points in the UK grew from just over 28,000 at the end of 2021 to 73,000 by the end of 2024. However, from now on, the sale of EVs will only grow exponentially year on year. In 2023, there were more than 314,000 new electric vehicles sold in the UK, and just later last year, that number grew closer to 400,000, which is almost a 25% increase in the sale of EVs in just a span of 12 months. Fast chargers are also improving, but they're still expensive to install and maintain. If you want to set up a charger at home, it could cost you anywhere between £650 to £1,000. And in many places, the electricity grid simply cannot handle so many EVs charging all at once. Which brings forth the inevitable question, if EV adoption keeps growing at this rate, will our electricity grid be able to keep up?
So it's a really emotive topic. I think actually there's a national responsibility that the government has to bear for charging infrastructure, right? So at the national level, we've got a huge amount of investment. You've got Ionity, you've got GridServe. They're pumping hundreds of thousands of millions of pounds into creating these hypercharging stations. But my view is that's not a mass market solution. It's a solution for those that are able to afford it. It's those that are able to afford 70, 80, 90 pence per kilowatt. That's a premium product, right? So that's going to be a 10% level of the population. So it's not a mass market solution. I think that's really, really important. You know, if you think how often you make a long journey, it's not that frequent. So you looked at, so you say, well, that's all very well if I'm making a long journey, but I only make a long journey once every couple of weeks or once every week or whatever. You go, actually, what's the local infrastructure looking like? And I think it's pretty abysmal. It's pretty awful. And I think the responsibility is to make electric vehicle usage attainable to everybody in the population, regarding of whether they're rich, they're poor, or they're, because that's the benefit, that's the future of them getting into low-cost motoring. So I've got a couple of examples locally. I've got there's one particular one, which is the Stratford-upon-Avon Park and Ride service. They have 2 electric chargers there, which have been out of operation for a significant number of months. It's under the jurisdiction of Warwickshire County Council. And then the other example is at Leamington Spa train station, which I was at yesterday. There was a bank of 10 chargers in their car park, all out of order, all covered up with bin bags, and they've been like that since they were built, which was about a year ago. And I think that is totally unacceptable. And I think there's the responsibility of local councils and support the national agenda for electric vehicle usage and adoption, and spend some money.
And then there's range anxiety, which is basically the fear of running out of charge on long trips. While new EVs offer upwards of 300 miles of range per charge, real-world conditions like cold weather, hilly terrain, and motorway driving drains batteries faster. And for someone who travels long distances frequently, this could be a real deal breaker. And if that wasn't enough, there is also another potential issue. EVs are marketed as the clean alternative to petrol and diesel-powered cars. But what actually goes into making an EV battery? EV batteries require materials such as lithium, cobalt, nickel, and graphite, elements that aren't unlimited and come with significant environmental costs. Lithium mining, for example, requires massive amounts of water, around 500,000 gallons, to extract just 1 ton of lithium. This is causing water shortages in regions like Chile and Argentina, where much of the world's lithium is mined.
I think there are 4 things the government needs to do in terms of fostering EV take-up more quickly. One is that their mandate policy doesn't work. So, I'm an economist. Markets consist of supply and demand. If the government is saying to get to net zero by 2050, we need to electrify the car fleet more quickly and the market isn't moving quickly, simply banging manufacturers on the head with a big stick and fining them for not meeting a predetermined target isn't enough. You've also got to look at the demand side. So the government removed prematurely upfront support for consumers in buying electric vehicles. They've got to rectify that. Countries where there's been very rapid take-up of electric vehicles either have had upfront subsidies, or if they're not prepared to do that, a differential tax system on purchase so that the VAT, the value-added tax on an electric vehicle, is lower than an internal combustion engine. So they've got to put demand incentives back in. On the supply side, the mandate is simply unrealistic. It's too inflexible, doesn't recognize the realities of where demand is. And we're ending up in the perverse situation whereby British-based manufacturers who can't hit the mandate target are going to be fined and will end up buying credits from Chinese producers and effectively will end up subsidizing Chinese makers. It is a totally crazy policy. Am I allowed to swear?
No.
No, okay. Okay. It's batshit, okay? So that's as far as I go. The government needs an industrial strategy to support the industry make the transition. Europe has one, America has one, China has one. We don't. Boris Johnson scrapped it idiotically. The government has a green paper on putting one back in place, but we're still awaiting it. It's too slow. So there's various bits of the jigsaw there that need to be put together, but the government's got to do that quickly.
The good news, Tesla seems to be one of the only companies to have dealt with most of these issues. They were the first company to launch their own proprietary charging network system, the Supercharger network, all the way back in 2012. And it still works brilliantly and reliably even today, which is what most governments and privately owned charging stations strive to be, but are not quite there yet. This also helps with range anxiety. With over 880 superchargers across the UK, most chargers support upwards of 200 kWh charging speeds, giving you around 200 miles of range in just 15 minutes.
The whole EV thing about being able to wake up to a car full of fuel is just brilliant. Never have to go to a petrol station again. So that's great for when you're just pottering around, plug it in a couple of times a week, job done. Then if you're on a longer trip, the supercharger network, as you say, is still to this day without parallel, really, because the way that Tesla has seamlessly integrated the car and the charging, the way it can plan your routes, the way the car prepares for fast charging, the way that you don't have to use an app, you don't have to tap a card. It is, as soon as you plug the car in, it knows that's a Tesla and it will start charging in a few seconds. And it's I mean, when we had the Renault, we were also using other networks, and whilst they're getting better, you just don't have that seamless ease of use or the planning of using them. I mean, it is getting better now that the third-party companies are starting to open up their data. So even in the Tesla, actually, I can tell if, say, an Ionity or another third-party one is occupied or vacant, so you can at least make some decisions as you're on a journey. But the Tesla one is just so seamless. It's just quite extraordinary how easy it is to use. And I suppose, for example, on a long journey I did in January, February, I was in Spain, and I did 3,500 miles, and not once did I have to leave the Tesla network. It was just wherever I needed it, it was there.
Tesla are also working on better recycling methods for rare minerals such as lithium, cobalt, and nickel from old EV batteries. And if done right, it could reduce the need for us to mine new materials and make EVs even greener. And to add a cherry on top, the US government is also helping private companies such as Rivian and Lucid to also use the supercharger network, as it is already tried and tested. But until that becomes the norm in all parts of the world, range anxiety, charging infrastructure, and lithium-ion disposal are still major issues. It's not all bleak for companies other than Tesla as well, as we are now finding out that going electric may have some other hidden benefits. Dr. Ben Lane, co-founder of ZapMap, the UK's largest website for electric charging stations, tells us more.
Now, it is true that per kilogram of EV, it takes more energy to make a kilogram of EV than it does a kilogram of ICE. I've crunched the numbers on that. Many other analysts have done that in the past. But when you look at the life cycle, how that vehicle is used, and what is the life cycle of the energy production from well to wheel, then EVs reduce, rule of thumb, by about 50%. Now, there are many. The key reason for that is an ICE vehicle throws away 75% of its energy. Heat engines generally max out at 25% efficiency. That's what heat engines do. That's the Carnot cycle. You can't beat it other than going to high temperatures. But for petrol and diesel vehicles, that's not. They are essentially maxed out on efficiency with a standard hybrid. So that's where we're starting from. Now, in the UK, our electricity mix is reducing its carbon intensity year on year, and I think we're on target for zero by I think it's well before 2050. So that doesn't mean your EV use per mile or per kilometer is zero, because you've still got production emissions, but within a year or two, you will be any emissions you'll have from that production will be paying back, and vehicles last 15 or more years. The early EVs are still on the road. Batteries are really performing well. There was some early concern that batteries wouldn't maintain their quality after 15, 20 years. It turns out that the batteries last longer than the vehicle. They do degrade by a couple of percent, but they last longer than the vehicle. What's interesting about EVs, and as with any new technologies, is there are new environmental impacts, and we need to think of those. So in this case, we've got more metal mining, more cobalt, nickel, lithium. We do need to look at that. There's no doubt we need to look at that, but those are included in those LCA analyses. There are lots of spurious stories out there about what EVs do and don't do. I'm not going to repeat them here, but the high quality research shows they are already better for the environment, certainly from emissions of greenhouse gases. There are some additional edge effects. We need to monitor those. We need to regulate mining. We need to be mindful. Battery chemistries are going to change. But even today, from a sustainability point of view, EVs are an improvement. We still need to have smaller cars. We still need to share vehicles. We still need to walk. We still need to cycle. We still need to use fossil fuels less. But like for like, if you're doing a proper comparison, then the LCAs show a sustainability gain.
But what if there was a way to solve all of these problems? And it may not be related to EVs at all. Electric cars are leading the charge towards a greener future. But is electricity the only solution? What if there was a way to use fuel without harming the environment? Sustainable fuels, also known as e-fuels, are synthetic alternatives to petrol and diesel and are made using carbon dioxide captured from exhaust and renewable energy. They can power cars that are currently on the road, reducing the need to dispose of your old car. And if that wasn't enough already, they're also completely carbon neutral. The first time me and you would see a technology like this in effect could be as soon as next year. This is a Formula One car, and Formula One has been developing a completely carbon neutral fuel since 2019. And this brand new fuel is set to be introduced and used by all 11 teams next year. These fuels can work in existing internal combustion engines, making them a great alternative to EVs without the need for massive infrastructure changes. We have seen technology trickle down from Formula One to regular everyday cars for a long time now. Semi-automatic gearboxes and paddle shifters have been in F1 since 1989, and now most cars also have paddle shifters. F1 has also been using hybrid V6 engines since 2014, and many new cars sold are now hybrid for better fuel efficiency and lesser emissions. But how do these compare to EVs? While they still produce emissions, the carbon dioxide used in their production offsets what's already released in the atmosphere, making them almost completely carbon neutral. Porsche has already started using this fuel in their Mobil 1 Super Cup series, but there are still a few issues that are yet to be resolved. The fuel is just not ready for mass production yet, and even if it is produced, it is quite expensive at around £4 a litre, which would be 4 times the price of regular petrol. But what makes me hopeful for the future with carbon neutral fuels is the fact that automotive enthusiasts could still enjoy their cars without having to forcefully conform to this silent revolution of EVs. Another promising solution are hydrogen-powered cars. Instead of burning fuel, hydrogen fuel cells create electricity by combining hydrogen with oxygen, creating only water as their byproduct. And many experts believe that hydrogen could be the ultimate clean fuel. Toyota has been working on a hydrogen fuel cell since 1922, and their latest creation, the Mirai, can provide an estimated range of around 400 miles on a single charge. That is pretty comparable, if not better, than most EVs, and this is just their second generation of the car. Hyundai is exploring the performance aspects of a hydrogen-powered car with their Envision 74. Proving that hydrogen could be a worthy replacement to fossil fuels, even for performance or racing. But just like sustainable fuels, there is a challenge to overcome. Hydrogen infrastructure is still very limited, and producing green hydrogen requires a lot of energy. If we can overcome these obstacles, hydrogen could be a game changer, and companies like Toyota, Hyundai, and BMW are striving to make this a reality. So after exploring all the current problems with EVs and some potential alternatives to the electric takeover, what is the future of transportation? The answer might not just be one solution, but a world where all electric, hydrogen, and sustainable fuel cars live in perfect harmony, almost as a mechanical ecosystem. Cities and towns might rely on electric vehicles to appeal to the reduction in noise levels and ease of use, while long-haul transport could use hydrogen to keep emissions to a minimum and get maximum range from a single charge. And car enthusiasts could resort to using sustainable fuels to power their traditional gas guzzlers without affecting the environment. Electric vehicles are just the first step of a revolution in transportation. Could sustainable fuels or hydrogen jump in to save the day? Or will EVs dominate after their long-standing teething issues are finally resolved? The future of mobility isn't just about replacing fossil fuels. It's about creating a truly sustainable system that could stand the test of time. And that future is closer than we think.